Welcome. A bit of a different setup today. Recording on the go. So I've come across a pocket of time, so I thought it'd be a good time to record. Apologies if the sound is not as clear as normal, and to be honest, I'm not sure how clear it is normally in a standard way, so yeah, we'll just kind of roll with it and see how this goes. I'll try to speak up a little bit. Usually I'm quite soft-spoken, so it's easy when I've got like a mic pinned here and I can speak a bit more gently, but I'm aware now the microphone is over there, so I'll try and project my voice a bit more if I can. So I've got the Sadhguru's book Karma with me, and I'd like to just continue a reading from the next passage, and yeah, I'll see what arises from that. So we're moving into chapter 4, and chapter 4 is titled The Great Karmic Warehouse. And I'll begin by sharing the sutra for this, which I believe is the thread, almost a bit of like the theme of this chapter. And this is Sutra 4. However profound it is, everything that comes from memory spells karmic bondage. So again, however profound it is, everything that comes from memory spells karmic bondage. And just by that alone, there's a sense when things are done by memory, it means that you're not doing it with a live presence. Things are done by memory, it's done unconsciously. And it's been many times in the book where it states when something is not done with that full attention, that full awareness, or that full abandonment, which has that presence built into it almost, when you immerse, then it always leaves some sort of impression behind, which I guess here it's used the word bondage, where it maybe leaves that residue behind which can feed into a compulsion or desire or unconscious habit, perhaps. So this episode will focus on the section in this chapter called Categories of Consequence. And again, I'll sort of almost muddle my way through and pick out what I can and try and extract little passages that I can that give some sort of wholeness to this section, something we can kind of take away with us. In the previous chapter, we looked at the 8 membranes of memory, 4 of which are collective and 4 of which are individual. However, the yogic system now leads us deeper into an exploration of individual karma. If you find yourself overwhelmed by the classifications that follow, do not get disheartened. As a reader, you do not have to remember these categories in order to decode karma. It would certainly be easy to dispense with these classifications, to make a karma book a simpler, breezier read. But if I include them, it is to reveal the incredible intellectual precision and sophistication of which the ancient yogis and sages were capable. Even if you were to simply read these categories without making any attempt to remember them, you would have a deeper and richer understanding of the subject. The workings of karma are complex, but the classification is a simple one. Let us take a look at the 4 essential categories of karma or consequence. Behind every individual is one vast storehouse of karma, the sum total of accumulated memory. This is like a great warehouse in which all 8 types of memory are contained, and here they are again listed: elemental, atomic, evolutionary, genetic, individual karma, sensory, articulate, and inarticulate. And it's shared here to say that the quantity of each of these categories, how much we have individually, can vary. And some of that can be from inheritance and of course of how we live our life now, of what's been accumulated can vary. And we can go back to our sort of habits and our unconscious behaviors as well, like how much are those reinforced, or was karma being created from previous karmic resonance. Now the vast storehouse of accumulated memory can contain 2 aspects. So one is actionable karma in the present, and one is actionable karma in the future. And it's shared here that we all have an allotted amount of karma for this lifetime. So a certain allotment of karma for a lifetime. It is the karma that needs to be handled now. So we started off with the title of the chapter, The Great Karmic Warehouse. So from that warehouse that's made up of the 8 categories of karma, for a collective, for an individual. From that, we have an allotment taken that's handled now in this lifetime. So there's only a limited amount of karma that's been given for this lifetime that we have to work through. And it's saying here that this karma, this memory, is being played out in this lifetime. It's almost it's part of our life force, what makes us do, people we see, the things we do, the thoughts and the emotions that come up within us. And for each person, the life energy works differently. Each person has a percentage of energy dedicated to physical activity, a different percentage to intellectual activity, a different percentage to emotional activity, and a different percentage to energy activity. And finally, a different percentage to the capacity for meditativeness or inner stillness. And the allotment of karma and how it looks, it's shared here that it's visible at an early age, that even parents can see distinctions between their children, how one child may be more physically engaged in activities, may engage more into that, where another child could be more engaged with intellectual activities. And later, of course, differences can grow because of the type of environment the child grows up in, the food they eat, the types of attitudes they develop. But very early differences are determined by the nature of each child's allotted karma. So we each have, I guess, an essence of our karma, then that could be malleable in regards to our environment and the parents we have. So that nature-nurture dynamic. Now, every spiritual process is essentially about digging into the storehouse of accumulated karma. Spiritual practitioners are people in a hurry. They want to dig up as much as possible and work it out, rather than wait for each allotment to ripen in its own time. This is why so much of the spiritual process is action-oriented. Spiritual seekers want to handle 10 lifetimes of karma in a single lifetime if they can. And the spiritual journey also teaches them to avoid accumulating new karma and to limit the consequence of their allotted karma. In this manner, they work through large karmic volumes at great speed. So again, we can take a lot of what's been read so far in regards to karma yoga. So, playing out karma without the karma being repeated, without adding to it. So we're kind of, when the things are done in the present moment, my understanding is that karma almost dissolves. Not to say that habit may come up again and show itself. It may be a deep groove of a certain habit or patterned thoughts that keep coming up. But as they're brought up and sort of dissolved in the light of awareness, then that groove becomes shallower and shallower. It's harder, versus the groove goes deeper and deeper the more, if you're doing sort of actionable karma, but in an unconscious way. And it's understandable that spiritual practitioners, you now understand, I guess, almost the name of the game. We're here to sort of burn away the karma. That's one of the main things in this lifetime. That, it becomes, there's more awareness of, okay, I can burn away more karma. Do not just work with my allotted karma, but go back and bring more karma up and burn that away as well. And it was mentioned here that, some want to burn away 10 lifetimes of karma in one lifetime, that they're working in this manner. How does one feel when one has emptied out one's allotted karma? Usually, life grows more relaxed, less reactive, less compulsive. Strong likes and dislikes, whether about people, places, food, work, or politics, begin to weaken. Comfort zones become less important. Initially, you may find you want to slow down and live quietly. After that, you will choose to engage with the world again. But this time it will be in a wonderfully conscious way. Your life is now full of choices. It's an important word, choices. Choices kind of resembles to me that there's spaciousness around, functionality and behavior. That you're not just sort of running in a wheel of karma and following compulsions and sort of, I guess being in that wheel, thinking that you're moving through life, and really you're just sort of going around the same karmic patterns and maybe adding karma to you. I got a sense that everything's built in. When you start with the simplicity of presence, it has natural built-in qualities that already try and bring spaciousness to things. Whether it's space between thoughts or spaciousness around an emotion or sensation. There's almost its own medicinal quality, healing quality to presence, to the aliveness of presence, or to the witness. So we now come to another aspect. Excuse me. We now come to another aspect of allotted karma. This is actionable karma in the present, or karma that compels outward action. We cannot resist its power. There are many impulses and propensities in a human being, but not all of them propel us to external action. However, every individual carries another type of karma that must be acted upon externally. The rest can be handled internally. How you handle your externally actionable karma in the present is significant because it creates consequences for the future. So again, this sort of shares with me, it's not what happens, it's how you respond. So the actionable karma, the way I understand this, is what's happening, things that might be out of your control. There may be certain life events or things with health that you have to, that cannot be resisted, that's there, and that's something. I think within that there may be variations and variables, but the essence of that action is something we have to go through. But it's how we respond to that. And that determines sort of consequences for the future or other things that need to be cleared up. So when some trigger compels action, how consciously you perform that action becomes important. If you do it unconsciously, that unconsciousness will generate an enormous amount of karma, and that is how karma perpetuates itself. So, and what stands out in that sentence is the enormous amount of karma. Like, it feels, I can sense in me is a bit of anxiety about that, a bit of, there's a lot on the line in some ways, but perhaps it's just my mind's, just my response to that, and maybe it becomes that sort of sharpens the, maybe I avoid the word practice, but it sharpens your beingness in every moment, that when you step out of that beingness of things are done from that unconscious space, that it can generate an enormous amount of karma. And maybe as time goes on, this will be felt, the vibration of this will be felt when maybe there'll be an action done, whether it's a conversation with somebody or whether it's doing a simple activity, and you may sense that, oh, I wasn't fully conscious for that, and I can sense there's some resonance, there's something left behind there that now I'm going to have to work through a little bit. Or you may sense the other end of the scale where you do something in complete presence and you feel very light from that. You feel there's nothing left over, and there's almost perhaps an enjoyment in that feeling. And it's shared here that if you perform right action, you can sort of alter your future, the makeup of how the ingredients of the future and your energies and what's taken from you, that can change. And it can elevate you as well, and without almost a spiritual process. It says, so without any spiritual process, when you perform the right actions today, a positive future is assured. But if you become meditative, you go a step further. Every spiritual tradition has encouraged people to meditate for this reason. When you become meditative, you do not merely create positive karma, you stop breeding karma altogether. In all spiritual traditions, to become an ascetic means just this: you stop breeding karmic consequences. And I'll read this example that Sadhguru gives. Let me offer a personal example. As a guru, when I am conducting a spiritual program, I am in a particular mode. If I embrace everyone before me with tears of joy and inclusiveness, it will not breed any karmic consequences. But if I do the same thing only with one person whom I know well, that same embrace will create consequences. This is because the inclusive embrace has no karmic substance to it. It is absolutely conscious action. So we can always take that example and sort of play with it a little bit. So when it's almost like a personalized hug, you can sense there's a personalized emotion with that hug or that gesture that sort of colors that with maybe an egoic resonance there, a resonance that's not so fully inclusive. That now there's, with that hug, there's thoughts about, I know this person, and maybe there's memories that become with that you've been with that person before. And you're less looking at them as just pure beingness, pure energy, and acknowledging their form while you're fully present. When it's personalized, perhaps you're putting on some sort of tinted glasses to that person that wouldn't be there otherwise. So that's maybe an example of that. This is why at a program, I never focus on the faces I know well. If I choose to meet another's gaze, I'll always pick a totally unknown face to address. As soon as you focus on someone you know and talk to them, it can turn into an entangling process. It would breed consequences for them, for me, and for the entire situation. However, if I'm developing a project, I do, of course, talk to intimate groups of people. I know this will not breed any entangling consequences for them, because what we are evolving is not about them or me, but about a larger vision. This is not entanglement because it is all an all-inclusive involvement. There is nothing selective about it. And that's what makes sense, because when working with someone, you're kind of working towards a common goal. So your energy is meeting at a certain point of a project. You're not sort of talking about their personal situation, and it becomes almost where the project, in the sense, becomes higher than any sort of personal feelings or personal entanglements. That's my first sort of interpretation of that. But look at it this way: if your actions are coming from memory, they will most certainly breed karma. We always say, therefore, that all human actions can be only of two kinds: those that destroy karma and those that breed karma. And that makes sense, because even breeding positive karma, as said just a moment ago, with right action, without the meditative process, then that will breed karma, but it may be positive karma, where things are done with full inclusiveness, full awareness, where there's no part of the little me involved in that. Then that sort of destroys karma. There's nothing to kind of, there's nothing to hold on to or build. You're not adding anything to you, in a sense. So I'm just trying to be selective on what I share here as well, in regards to sort of fair use of the book. It did come across, which I may consider in the future with future books, perhaps, whether to get the author's permission to kind of read it fully, potentially in sort of episodes. I wonder if that's something that would be good to do with certain books that work. Other books maybe are a lot easier just like to read, a little bit here and there, such as someone like Eckhart's book. But with this book, because it's so, in some ways, I guess, spiritually technical in some respects, there's lots of details, so it can be a bit of an art to sort of pick out extracts to make it make sense for this episode, or for just briefly dipping into the book. So I'll pick up a little bit further down. We're talking now about actionable karma in the future. And it says here, the actionable karma in the future, it perpetuates the human cycles of compulsive action, leading to what the Indian spiritual tradition sees as cycles of birth and death. It propels human beings to return to the embodied state time and again in order to work out their karmic inheritance. So again, that makes sense. If there's more karmic resonance left over that requires actionable karma in the future, then it sort of means, that needs to at some point be resolved and coming back to the embodied state, as it says here. And if you find the idea of future lifetimes problematic, do not be distracted by it at this stage, nor is it essential to an understanding of karma. For the true yogi, there is just one life. Yesterday you may have been dressed in one way, and today you may be dressed in another. Life, however, stays unchanged. If you handle your actionable karma in the present, consciously, you will not breed any compulsive, actionable karma in the future. That is the key to handling memory. And there's some sort of supportive words here saying, the aim is to enjoy this process, not be trapped by it. So karmic memory can be complex, and it can be varied, and it's saying here, that ideally, ultimately, you do not want to accumulate any karma that will compel you to act compulsively in the future. Going a little bit further down here, the karmic trap is always in the choosing. Choice is the great human gift. Freedom is the great human possibility. However, instead of choosing inclusively, most human beings choose selectively. Most choose on the basis of compulsive likes and dislikes, on the basis of attraction and aversion. But when your involvement is absolute, that is, inclusive, you are not operating out of past memory. This means there is no compulsion, no consequence, no entanglement, no choice, no friend, no foe. When you perform actionable karma in the present like this, you breed no actionable karma in the future whatsoever. So perhaps I'll read the last couple of paragraphs from this section. We're coming to the end of this section in this chapter. Once you understand how the karmic mechanism works, you know a basic difference between involvement and entanglement. And it's clear that most people do not understand the fact that it is possible to absolutely be involved without getting entangled. So it's talking about, I guess, that full immersion in something, but there's no you to be entangled there. Often the entanglement requires subject and object. It requires that sort of, there's somebody to get entangled, to become entangled. But when, I guess, you're fully involved in something, there is no you that can be entangled in it. You're part of, there's no energy left over that's hoping for an outcome from it, or hoping this doesn't happen, or a like or dislike. For instance, whether I meet a stranger or a friend, my interiority remains the same. I guess my inner energy remains the same. My involvement is total. I may communicate and act differently, but internally I remain the same. My way of being remains unchanged, although what I do or say is relevant to the situation and the person. This breeds no karma. When involvement is selective, you fall into the trap of entanglement. Here is the central problem. Selective involvement leads to suffering and karma. Detachment leads to lifelessness. But involvement need not come from a place of memory. It can be conscious. For most people, involvement springs from memory and is compulsive. Once memory enters, action is enslaving. Without memory, however, you can operate consciously. When your action is unsullied by past impressions, it is liberating. So this brings us to the end of that chapter. So just going back to the title to remind myself of it. So yeah, categories of consequence. That was the title of this section here. So again, it's a bit of an art and a bit of a developing practice of being present, being fully aware, being fully involved, being fully inclusive, but not getting entangled. So one of the key things here is where your inner beingness remains the same. And when you're coming from that, the way I'm seeing this or feeling this now, as we've just read it, is when you're dealing with the oneness, the simplicity of oneness, then even if it's a form that you recognize and you've shared with, then it's still an expression of the oneness. So being fully in the fully present moment, or in presence or beingness, when you're shining with that and you're seeing beingness around you, then there's an automatic mechanism in place that there isn't that sort of selectiveness, that I prefer this, I don't want that. There is that sort of full immersion and full involvement of, oh, okay, this is... and perhaps a lot of this will make sense in terms of just being present and, go back to the example of making a cup of tea, using that as a meditative practice, where it's something that's sort of low stakes and seeing how that feels. And then moving on to something more complex, like dealing with people, where a lot of this may come up within us a lot more in terms of how our inner beings are with one person and the state of our inner being to another person. And this is, I guess, is my basic understanding of this. And I guess that one of the key things I've taken from this is not to sort of dwell upon the karmic warehouse and fears of how much karma I've got to work through, or it says many times in this book that karma, the burning of karma, can speed up dramatically. I think he said, just as karma can be accumulated enormously with unconscious actions, karma can be sped up enormously, burned away with conscious actions. And it's that reminder sort of to be gentle and to start simple actions. Maybe waking up in the morning, there could be some awareness to that, and how you wake up in the morning. What is being done? Are you reaching for the phone? Are you reaching for a glass of water to replenish yourself? And how are you reaching for the glass of water? And maybe go at your own speed, because you want to sort of not be in a fearful state of, okay, I have to create less karma, and you want to sort of naturally blend and integrate and enjoy the feeling of being present. And I think Eckhart's great in that sense, where in the simplicity there's almost an enjoyment in that, and there's a gentleness when doing things. So I hope there was some help in that section, that chapter, and understanding more about karma. And yeah, I'll see you again very soon. Thank you very much for joining me. I wish you well, as always.